Welcome to the Vault, the Vintage Phone Vault. In this series, I will be attempting to cover every single possible normal cell phone ever made, starting off with the Motorola RAZR. This will exclude any sort of smartphone, as that will be for a different series. But in this series, we will be covering every single one since their introduction, and we will be starting off with the Motorola RAZR due to it becoming a household name in the early 2000s. I have the specs of the different models that I have with me. The V3 and the V3C are virtually identical except for a small camera upgrade and a different usage in their carriers. Now, some of them are carrier locked, and that's because the V3C that I have with me anyways are CDMA models, which cannot be used with any other carrier unless you somehow hack it, or you get a older version which can use a full-sized SIM card and you somehow bypass the carrier restrictions. Now, the V3 and the V3C appear to be identical at first, but there are some minor changes. If you can see on the V3C, there is no little notch on both sides of the top part of the screen. The mini USB port has not changed, and the battery cover is kind of different, as in this one has two prongs, but if you look at the other one, it only has one prong. Now, unfortunately, the black one I have does not have the back cover, but that's merely a cosmetic difference. But if you start to look at them, you can see that the actual operating system and the button layout is kind of different. Now, if you look at the black one on the left, it has a top button to go to the menu. And if you look at the 0 key, the arrow on them is also different. And the internet and email browsing buttons have been changed to a camera and clear button. Now, the batteries are the same size and they can be used, but apart from their color differences, they are pretty similar. But you can clearly see the camera has a significant bump, and the screen resolution on the top screen is also different. As you can see by shining a light on these, the older one is smaller, but the newer one is slightly taller, making it more of a rectangle. And here you can clearly see how the older one on the bottom has a small line, which seems to be a easier grip to grab onto the screen while opening it, but from the V3C, this wasn't a necessary feature, and many people didn't really know what it was for. Now, if you compare them side by side, they do look almost identical in the size and almost weight, but again, the camera bump is making it slightly irregular when laid flat. Otherwise, the mini USB port has remained unchanged, and the buttons on the side have also remained unchanged. Now, these are nearly identical in every way, with small differences. But that's to be expected with a small redesign like the V3C, which was only released a year later after the original model. Once you start to compare the RAZR with a more modern smartphone, you can see that although they are made from the same anodized aluminum finish, they are able to make calls and texts and take pictures. Their differences really start to show. The more modern smartphone has a multi-touch touchscreen, which is usually high definition, while the RAZR is stuck with two standard definition screens and a much lower camera. It is also limited by the physical keypad and the fact that it's a non-touchscreen display. Now, with the more modern smartphone, it has a much more up-to-date connector and even a headphone jack, while the RAZR surprisingly does not have one, only a mini USB port. Now, if you also compare it to a smaller device like the iPod Nano 6th generation, you can see that it's pretty much the same size as the top glass, but the screen on the Nano is actually bigger. It is similar to the size of the battery cover. Taking photos couldn't be easier with these older phones. A lot of the times there's an on-screen button or there's a physical button to click to open the camera. It's usually a 1 or 2 step operation, but as you can tell, the camera does display, and although it's not the best quality, it does work. Now, on the older one, it's obviously a VGA camera, so you can only expect VGA quality, but on the newer V3C, it is a whole megapixel. And as you can tell from these photos, I tried my best to capture it, but as you can see, the screen is very reflective and it did not help. I'm also showing how the refresh rate of the camera is very slow, because with a lower resolution also comes a lower processing power for the camera, and it is much more slower than what you would expect on a modern smartphone. Also, this clip of opening a photo in real time is actually this slow. It takes 4 seconds to open a standard definition photo on this camera, and this is the newer V3C model. So now it's time to show the software. On the left is the older V3 launch model, while the right is the newer V3C model. As you can see, the menu, the text, everything about them is completely different. On the left, you get a more early 2000s feel, while on the right, you can see that it's a more modern-ish approach to the smartphone menu. It reminds me of a early version of Windows Mobile used on PDAs because of the scroll bar, how the text is, and many of the buttons. And on the right, it is much easier to find many things, while others are hidden in menus. On the left, a lot of the items are just in small categories, and it is easy to find anything you need on the older one. And in my opinion, I prefer the older one because it's what I remember the most while growing up. This is the operating system that we had on our old Motorola RAZRs. We never had the V3C model because we had the physical SIM card one. And it didn't really make much of a difference because being only 1 year apart, there was no point to upgrading when it's virtually the same phone. There's one last thing. The charger with the fold-out prongs is the one that came with the V3 model. And this one is the one that I've had with our original V3 models. The other one is from a different, more newer model, but it is still a mini USB charger. Now, the normal V3 model can also charge with a normal mini USB to USB-A, but the V3C cannot. Due to the newer operating system, it detects it as a non-OEM charger and will not charge. If you try to charge this with the newer V3C model, it will just reject it and it will not charge at all. Even though I will power up to tell you that this is not a real charger. The Motorola RAZR. It has made something thought to be only of a luxury into a necessity, and it paved the way for widespread use of the smartphone. This has been Vintage Phone Vault, and as always, thanks for watching.